Hi, I'm Paige.
And I'm Michael.
And this is our presentation on a scientific article called Production of Polyrhythms.
So this experiment essentially is testing how well people can produce polyrhythms. And the question is, how can this be tested? In order to answer that, the authors of this article and also the experimenters created a model. And what the model does is set a basis for what they can test. So it predicts certain things, and we can test those certain things and see how well the model works, that we can get data of how well people produce polyrhythms. And so here's one of the model predictions. The model provides a basis for what constitutes as an error. And so in this situation, if the polyrhythm is a 4 versus 3 polyrhythm, it defines what time intervals the polyrhythm must be in order to constitute as like a correct cycle of polyrhythms. The next prediction is that an increase in selectivity will increase the amount of errors, and that basically just means that the more polyrhythm, the more complex the polyrhythm is, the greater chance there is for error, which makes sense, because if there's more polyrhythm, there's more things to keep track of, and so it should be more difficult and therefore more errors. And the last prediction says that the timing of the fast hand, so the hand that hits the larger of the 4 versus 3, which in this situation would be a 4, is not dependent on the timing of the slow hand. So I thought that was kind of interesting to think about, that one hand completely works independently of the other one, even though you need both hands to produce the polyrhythm.
So the method for this experiment, they had 12 right-handed subjects, and the right-handedness will come into play later in our discussion. They had 6 musicians and 6 non-musicians, and they did the experiment over 5 sessions on consecutive days. So each day they brought in each participant, and they had the participants listen to the polyrhythm. Let's say it's a 4 versus 3 polyrhythm. They had them listen to it for 20 cycles, so 20 measures. If you're more of a musician, you might know what that means. And they had them listen to it for 20 cycles, and then past that, as many cycles as they needed to feel that they understood the rhythm. So they got some good practice, and they were encouraged to tap along to the rhythms. And then for the actual test, they had the participants play the polyrhythms 3 versus 2, 5 versus 2, 4 versus 3, 5 versus 3, and 5 versus 4, where the faster pulse, so if we stick with our 4 versus 3 example, the 4 was played through the right headphone, and the slower pulse, so the 3 in this case, was played through the left headphone. And then they were instructed to tap the faster rhythm with their right index finger, so it was the faster, the 4 was coming through their right headphone, and they had to tap it with their right index finger, and then the left slower rhythm they were supposed to tap with their left index finger. And then after only 2 cycles of the rhythm in the actual test, the rhythm stopped playing through their headphones, and so the pulses were removed, and they were instructed to continue tapping along to the rhythm for an additional 20 cycles. So this is a long time. So here we have the first results table from the experiment. So to explain it, I'll point to some examples. So here, they also had a slow version of the polyrhythm and a fast version of the polyrhythm. I forgot to mention that. So in this case, for the 4 versus 3, the slow polyrhythm, if they were to continue playing it perfectly after the rhythm stopped, each cycle was supposed to take 2100 milliseconds. So what they did, the experimenters, they took the average of all of the durations. So each of the 20 cycles, they took the durations, and they took the average of those, and these numbers are shown here. So for the slow cycle, it should have taken 2100 milliseconds, but the average duration of it for the musicians was 2065, and then for the non-musicians, it was 2071. And the same goes for the fast rhythm, except it was supposed to be 1500, and then here it's 1530 and 1528. So as we can see from this, there wasn't really significant evidence from this table that the musicians had an increased ability over the non-musicians. And this we found kind of interesting, because you'd think that the musicians would be a lot better at producing the polyrhythms, but from this we can see that there wasn't really a significant difference. But then in this table, what they did is they took the mean deviations in milliseconds of the continuation task. So they took the deviations from what would be perfect to what actually happened for each cycle, and they compiled it. And here we can see these numbers. So we actually, in this table, see that the musicians do deviate from the non-musicians, which that makes more sense to us because musicians, usually have a more an inclination to just do better with rhythms and everything like that. So this table makes a little more sense than the last one, but they're both measuring the continuation task.
And this is our last graph, and so what it measures is the coefficient of variation, so essentially how much they vary, and we measure the musician's fast hand, which is this guy, and it may be hard to see, but it follows that path. The slow musician, the musician's slow hand, the non-musician fast hand, the non-musician slow hand. And what we see is that, so the higher it is on this coefficient of variation means the further off they were from the actual rhythm. So we see that the non-musicians, especially for their slow hand, have a lot of variation as the complexity of the rhythm goes up, which is what the model predicted, so that makes sense. And we also see that there's just, the musicians overwhelmingly just had less deviation in general. They just stayed pretty, except maybe this is a little outlier, but it stays pretty low. And the non-musicians seem to have, clearly a huge increase. And this is what we expect. We expect the musicians to be more consistent and more concise opposed to the non-musicians. And this also talks about this fast hand versus slow hand prediction that said the fast hand will keep rhythm and be independent of the slow hand. And this seems to show that, especially for the non-musicians, where the right hand variation is so low, it's all over here, and then the left hand, which is the slow hand, is all the way up here. So it looks like the model that they've created is doing pretty well.
So for our discussion, kind of overall, the entire purpose of the experiment was to test the model to see if it was reliable. And part of that was the points that Michael just made, and the data collected generally agrees with the model's predictions, like Michael just said. So that's good. That's really great for the experimenters.
And then on a more interesting note, the fast hand domination that was observed, I thought was really interesting. There's a couple ideas that I just wanted to bring up, and I guess they're hypothetical questions for you because you're not a live audience. But so this appears to agree with top-down processing, meaning that they're not taking it like the rhythms from like a structural standpoint, saying like, oh, we should develop like both rhythms equally and build it up to more complex things. It seems that they just take, well, in this case, their right hand in the faster rhythm, and that just dominates, and that they just try to do the activity based on this small like sample of the whole experiment. I thought that was just like an interesting thing. And then there's something called the cocktail party effect, which essentially means, it's called the cocktail party effect because if you were at a cocktail party, you can kind of pick and choose like other groups that are talking, and you can listen to it. So even though like all these people are talking and all these people, there's all this noise, you have the ability to just kind of tune in to one conversation. And so what that means in this situation is the cocktail party effect, they would pick a certain type of with the cocktail party effect, they would pick either the fast or the slow rhythm. And it was interesting that every single time it seemed that people chose the fast rhythm. And I was wondering, well, why is that so? Why are they picking just the fast rhythm and not the slow rhythm? Why don't we see like a 50-50 distribution of people who chose to ignore the fast rhythm and follow the slow rhythm opposed to follow the fast rhythm and ignore the slow rhythm? And then a concern, or I guess a slight criticism, no offense to them, but all the subjects are right-handed, and then they have the fast beat through their right ear, and so clearly they're going to favor their right side. And so what does that say about their explanations that the right hand was generally more consistent, and that's the fast one? I feel like they should have had maybe switched which rhythm goes to which ear, or have them play the fast rhythm with their left hand versus their right hand. So I feel like all the predictions that they made are just set up the fact that all the subjects are right-handed and all the music's played through the fast rhythm is played through their right ear. So I thought that was maybe a flaw.
And this might be why the cocktail party effect didn't kick in, because if everyone favors their right hand and the fast rhythm is playing through their right ear, then it seems like of course they're gonna favor that one. So it might be good, as Michael mentioned, to maybe have a different experiment or have more participants where half of them play the fast rhythm with their left hand and then half play with their right. That might just add some more reliability to the experiment.
And also maybe just get some left-handed people. I feel like that works as well.
Mm.
But yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys for watching.
Thank you so much.